So we have two curly girls here. Zephyra would probably be considered about a 4A. Would I be right in saying you're about a 4A? Yep, see? So it's important to speak that language. Like, we spoke the same language just now. Like, I could look at her and say, you're about a 4A, and she says yes. So why is that important? That's important because that tells you just the size of her curl pattern, right? Like, it tells you if it's the size of perhaps like a pencil, or is it the size of like a spring inside a pen, or is it the size of like, you know, chalk, or basically it's telling you how fragile or how delicate that hair may be. You know, the smallest pattern is going to have the most sort of spring, the most elasticity, but it's also going to have the most spots in that strand of compromised hair and integrity, because every time the hair turns, there is a weak spot. We're thinking about hair, and I'm taking you back to cosmetology school a little bit, where we think about the hair twisting and turning. One, we know that this hair is definitely more on the dry side because natural oils cannot travel down curly hair that's winding and twisting, so it generally wicks off. So this is by nature, not even anything that they've done, it's not anything wrong. By nature, curly hair is dry. So hair thrives with moisture and hydration. So one of the things that is a fantastic aid or tool is using things like clay lightener. So we just sort of at Matrix launched clay lightener for open air techniques. You know, we don't tend to think of open air techniques being performed on a lot of dark colored hair. However, you do have a lot of curly haired people that are living in that 5s and 6s, and even if they're coming back to you and you're building on color you previously did, open air is a wonderful solution. And open air doesn't always have to mean completely open. You can incubate, you can put film, you can put the mesh, you can still sort of cover it without tucking it inside a tight foil and just let it still process slowly and naturally. So with Renee and with Zephyra, we have a lot of models, so Zephyra. We did more of a freehand technique. A lot of people may know it. Words have been thrown around to describe it as sort of like a pintura, where it's just painting curl. And this is really fun because it's super organic. What a lot of people don't realize is simultaneously sometimes, both of these ladies, they came in with previously colored hair. So when you're building, it's like a playground because you're not starting from scratch, you're not starting from the darkest hair color. What was neat about Zephyra's story was that she actually wanted to keep her root. So her level 4, 5, like sort of like a 4.5, not quite a 4, not quite a 5. And so there was intention to lighten her up. However, about an inch of her hair she requested to keep that because she didn't want that grow out, but she wanted that illumination. She wanted to have a hot girl summer. So she wanted to be really blonde and really light. And so we thought that the best technique for that was to, again, do a freehand painting technique that incorporates highs and lows and tipping. And so we were able to just really what would be your starting place for that, right? So you'd ask that person to come in with their hair already curly, not a lot of heavy product, so like a leave-in conditioner, something really light. Let their hair dry in the way that they wear it, because you need to see those clusters. You need to see that hair in the shape. You need to see where it falls. You need to see how those curls clump together. And so really, this is as organic can be. I am not even using a comb. I'm really handling this hair with the premise that when she comes to you with her hair, there has been some detangling that has happened already. So even though it's curly and it's kind of like living big, it's still going to have an element of ease when you just sort of just take your finger, either your index or your pinky. I like to use both, and just sort of separate the hair. Keep in mind that it is not a straight part. You are not looking for a straight part. You don't need to make straight parts in curl because it all sort of gets diffused anyway. So if I see this living back here as hair that's already forming and having an existing clusters, I'm going to take this as my cue to, I already see what pops, what undulates, and what sort of is concave versus convex, right? So it's like what comes out versus what goes under, and that's sort of the nature of a curl, right? So I'm seeing what is popping out, and those are my cues to go in and paint those areas, right? So I would do more of a surface paint on those areas that are naturally, this is what her hair does. So naturally, it is just painting on top, right? And then I can still keep that concept of creating lighter ends with more of a full saturation on those tips. Yes, I should be wearing gloves right now. However, it didn't happen, so forgive me, but I felt like it was more important to just show you that. So again, just tipping out so that those ends that live, because we understand that curls, the ends live very, it lives very three-dimensionally, right? So it lives up, it lives out, it lives down. It doesn't live in a one-dimensional state. So when you have those tipped out ends, it's going to create a different feeling than something that's living down here. It's going to live out here, especially if you're wearing like those fringes that frame the face and are like all that hair. Another thing to remember is that on curl, as you can see with Zephra, the back oftentimes becomes the front. A lot of times the hair is brought from the back and it's brought to the front, so you have to think about your color placement. This also becomes a money piece. So that ignoring of like what's back here becomes like you can't do that when you're talking about someone who actually always wears their hair forward. So that's, I'll continue in this pattern, and it's really not even a pattern, it's very curated. It's very visual. So it's you looking at where you see these pops, where you think these pops need to happen. Like I'm seeing this other little cluster right here, and I'm like, that's an opportunity to paint and have it pop out. And then my second bowl, my secondary color, would be a low light. And on Zephra, her low light is not as dark as her natural base, and it's not even as dark as the created new base. It's a little bit lighter so that she continues to live. Again, this is an example of like the golds and the ashes living together. She was very anti bright, warm yellow. She was like, I do not want that. And so to really exist in this range and bring her up from that 4 or 5 level, and have that integrity, you are doing some good things when you can get that combination and get that result.
They're both gorgeous. One question I have, just on a personal note, I'm wondering, is saturation really important on the curls, or do you want it to sit on the top of the curl?
So I think it's what your intention is, right? So if your intention is to just have color sort of just almost sparkle, then surface saturation is perfect. If you are looking to have bold presence and like streams, almost like when you think about straight hair and you think about ribbons, when you like to see things like ribbons, then you're going to have more of a full saturation as opposed to a surface saturation. And if you just want tips, like tipped out ends, that's usually fuller saturation as well. Does that answer?
Sense.
Okay.
Yeah,
cool.
thank you.